All right, I'm up here in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm shooting a volleyball tournament today, and I wanted to share the settings that I'm using to shoot this volleyball tournament. So if you want to get great volleyball pictures, stick around. All right, so today I'm shooting with the Canon R8, and I've got the Canon 70-200 2.8 lens. This is a fast lens. This is part of the L series, so you know that it's going to be professional series glass. And to marry the two, I've got the Canon EF to RF adapter, and that adapts this Canon EF lens to the RF mount of the Canon R8. All right, so the Canon R8 is a video-centric mirrorless camera, but it does have a setting that is really cool for shooting sports, and that is it allows you to shoot 40 frames per second in the burst mode. So when you're shooting these fast-moving sports like volleyball, when you hold that shutter down, man, it cranks out a bunch of frames, and then you can go back through and just select the ones that have the ball in the exact position that you want it. It makes it really nice for shooting sports. All right, so the way I shoot these is I make sure that my camera is set up before I get to the court, and I want to make sure a couple of things. And first of all, you're going to want to put your camera on manual mode, because what you want to do is make sure that you have as much control over things as possible. So I'm going to go over some of the settings that I have here in manual mode. The first is I have it on full manual. I don't have it on shutter priority or aperture priority, anything like that. I've got it on full manual, and I have the shutter set at 1/500th of a second. Now I've got it set that high because I want to stop the action of the ball. I don't want a really blurry ball. If I was down at 2/50th or 1/25th, that ball would kind of have a trail. I really want to stop the action midair. So I've got it at 1/500th. Now, if I was shooting outside, I might even bump that up even more, but because I'm shooting inside and I've got limited light to deal with, you have to kind of shoot the lowest shutter speed that you can and still stop the action. All right, the next thing I've got set is my aperture, and that's set at 4.5. Now, this is a 2.8 lens, so you can go lower than that, but the problem is if you go a lot lower, what happens is your depth of field gets much more shallow. So you're kind of balancing here, having a fast shutter speed and a wide aperture, because you don't want the aperture too wide, because then you're going to have too shallow of a depth of field. You're going to get a lot of blurry shots. So I'm using 4.5. If I could use something like f8, I would, but that bumps the ISO up really high. So it's really just going to depend on how much light you have. But in general, with some of these sports, you want to kind of balance the shutter speed and the aperture to get the kind of look that you're looking for. So for me, in these indoor gyms, that's around 1/500th of a second and 4.5 on the aperture. Now the ISO, what I do is I bump the ISO up or down depending on how much light is in the gym. So today's gym, we've got 10,000 on the ISO. Now in older cameras, you may not be able to bump up that high, but some of these newer cameras, the noise on the sensor is really pretty low, even at these higher ISOs, so you can get away with that. So be careful if you're shooting with an older camera. You may not be able to bump the ISO up that high, and you might have to actually bump the shutter speed down so you can get more light to the sensor. So that's what I'm running today, 1/500th on the shutter, 4.5 on the aperture, and 10,000 on the ISO. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the important settings here. So I'm going to hit the quick set button, and one of them is this high-speed continuous. So the drive mode, you want it in high-speed continuous plus or high-speed continuous. Now it's important to make sure that you have it on electronic shutter, because if you don't have it on electronic shutter, then you're not going to be able to get as many frames per second out of this thing. All right, so you want to make sure that the shutter is in electronic. So I'm going to hit the menu button, and I'm going to go over here to the number 7 menu on the first one. And I'm going to go down to shutter mode and make sure it's in electronic, because if it's in any other mode, you won't be able to get as many shots off. All right, so one of the things I do that makes my workflow later in the day a lot easier is I'll actually set a custom white balance. And to do that, I've got this little thing called the Datacolor SpiderChecker video. Now I shoot a lot of video, so that's why I have the video version, but they also have photography versions. There's also a few other companies that make these sorts of things. But what you want to do is if you open this thing up, one of the things it has is going to be this little white balance target. And what I can do is set a custom white balance using the function within the camera. So I go to the white balance settings, I slide over, select custom white balance. It'll ask me to shoot a white balance target, which is this thing here. So I'll set this up, I'll shoot it. Make sure that when you're shooting this, you have it in pretty good, it's in sort of flat lighting, there's no reflections coming off of it, that sort of thing. And then boom, you set that custom white balance, and now the camera is set for all day shooting. So you don't have to go back and edit a million pictures and adjust the white balance for all of them. Now I will say in a lot of the newer gyms, they have these LED lighting, which is really nice because the lighting is really even. If you're in an older gym that has those lights that are, they kind of buzz, I think they're sodium lights or whatever they're called, those actually change color throughout their cycle, and your eye can't see it, but your camera can. So you may see that in some images they're a little green, and some images they may be a little magenta. So in that case, if you're in a gym with these older lights, you may actually have to white balance every picture anyhow. But in a lot of the newer gyms, they have the LED lighting, and these things are fantastic because you can set the white balance once and you don't have to worry about it. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about where I like to stand when I'm shooting volleyball in particular. So there's really two places that I like to stand. One is towards the middle of the net, and that's probably about 10 to 12 feet from the net, and I'm back from the edge of the court, maybe about another 8 to 10 or 12 feet. And I'm really there in the kind of the front of the court, and that way I can get all the action that's up near the net. The problem with this is that it makes it hard to get some of that action that happens on the back of the court, right, in that back row. All right, so the other place that I like to stand is towards the back of the court, and that's going to be kind of aligned with the back line there. And I'm going to, again, be off to the side of the court, somewhere between 8 and 12 feet. I'm kind of shooting in almost a 45-degree angle across the court, and that's going to give me a pretty good view of all the positions. And I'll basically alternate between the front of the court and the back of the court. Sometimes I'll stand directly behind the court if there's enough room. Some gyms have room and some gyms don't. But generally, those are the two positions that I'll stand. One is sort of at the third point of the court, and the other one is way at the back of the court. All right, so I want to give you some tips on how you can manage taking a bunch of pictures with sports and not having to offload all these pictures. So as I mentioned earlier, when I shoot this camera, it shoots 40 frames per second, which means it's blowing through a lot of pictures really quick. I mean, I'll have hundreds and hundreds of pictures just from one match on volleyball, and often shooting these tournaments all day, you know, they have 6 or more matches, so you can really add a lot of pictures to your card very quickly. But the trick is, what I do is I actually mark the pictures as the favorites as I'm shooting them, and then with Adobe Bridge, all I have to do is find the pictures that I've starred. Now I like to do 3 stars. So in Adobe Bridge, I go in and I find the pictures that are starred 3, and then those are the only pictures that I pull off of the camera. So I don't have to pull off all the thousands of pictures that I've shot all day and then go through and look and see which ones I like. As I'm shooting, I'm hitting the set button on this camera, and then if you set it up right, you can get to where you can hit 3 stars and then hit the set and then go back on. So what I'll do is I'll shoot a bunch of pictures, and then I will go through the last 20 or 30 pictures, whatever it is, and I'll star the 3 or 4 pictures that I like, and then all I gotta do at the end of the day is go through Adobe Bridge, turn the filter on to only show me 3 stars or above, and then those are the pictures that I slide off into Lightroom and do my final edits in. Now I'm gonna show you what I do during a tournament. So I'm shooting images, and I'm reviewing them. So I'm hitting the play button and I'm going through it and finding out which ones I like. And if I like this one, I'm going to hit the set button here, and then that's going to bring this menu up, and I can go down to this star, and then at the bottom here you can see number of stars that you can assign. So I'm going to assign that one 3 stars, and I'm going to hit set. Now during the tournament, once you set that star button the first time, it should come up automatically the second time. So I'll hit the play button here, and I'll hit the set, and now you can see that I have the stars down here at the bottom. I can hit 3 stars and hit set. So it becomes pretty quick to review this during the tournament. Now some cameras have a dedicated rating button, which makes it nice. Those are on some of the higher end cameras. This is a Canon R8. So the way that I have to do it is by hitting this set button and then going through and making sure I'm on the star menu and then hitting the 3 stars below. All right, so now I'm in Adobe Bridge, and what I want to do is only select those images that I've rated and that I've put a star on. And so what I've done is I've surfed to the folder that has all of my images on it. And as you can see, there's thousands of images here that I've shot over the couple of days. I do want to show you one kind of interesting thing that I've figured out to do is between matches, I'll go and outside and I'll shoot a couple of frames just overexposed, and that gives me a nice marker image to see between sets. And so you can see that because the camera was in burst mode, it took a bunch of pictures, but I've only starred one of those. So now I'm going to go up here and click show 3 or more stars. And now this is just going to filter it down to the ones that I've rated in the camera. And boom, you have a lot more manageable amount of pictures here. You can see I've got that one frame to show between sets that way, because what I typically like to do is we have some downtime between sets, and so what I'll do is basically edit pictures waiting for the next game to come around. So I've already selected this as my first image for today, this one with the red label on it here. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to go down to the last image of the day, and I'm going to hold the shift button and left click, and that should select all of those images. And then what I'm going to do is make this window a little bit smaller here. I've got a new folder that I'm going to copy these off onto, so I'm copying them off my camera card onto my storage device, and I'm going to just drag these all over here. And now I'm just copying the images that have been starred in camera, and this gives us a lot more manageable amount of pictures to go ahead and edit. All right, so I've imported all the images in the Lightroom, and one of the first things that I like to do is I like to go back and I like to crop all of my images. So I'm going to crop all of my images. I like to shoot wide, so most of these shots are at 70 millimeters. And the reason I like to shoot wide is because it's less chance of missing some of the action. If you shoot, a little more cropped in, then you have a chance of the ball not being in the frame or whatnot. And cameras today really have so much resolution that, you can crop in and not lose a bunch of quality with the picture. So what I like to do is, again, go through here and crop, and I might turn this one vertical just because this is kind of how the action is looking here. And that one looks okay. And so anyhow, I'll go through and crop all these. All right, so I've got all the images to where I've cropped them the way I want them to. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to just make some adjustments to the exposure and the contrast. So I'm on my laptop here, and when I get back to my office, I may go and adjust some of these, but what I'm doing is I'm really just doing some basic adjustments. So I'm going to hit the auto to get started here and see what it looks like. Now remember, I've already done the white balance correction in camera, so it really shouldn't have much difference there. And then I'm going to look at that, and I think that looks pretty good. And what I'm going to do is just add just a little bit of contrast in here, so a little bit of S-curve contrast. So I'm going to add a lower node where I pull it down and an upper node where I pull it up. And I kind of like that there. So what I'm going to do is hit Command C, and I'm going to copy the edit settings. I'm just going to go back to the beginning here, and I'm going to start applying these to all the pictures. And then as I go, there may be a picture or two that I need to make an adjustment to. But overall, I think this is looking pretty good. And really that's how I do my edits. So I try and figure out which images I want in the camera, and then I bring it into Bridge and I only copy off the images that are rated or starred in the camera. And then from there I'll go ahead and I'll do my crops, and then I'll come back and I'll do the edits, and that's about it. This process saves me a bunch of time from how I used to edit sports. It used to take me hours to go through all these pictures until I really figured out that, hey, you really just want to do the ones that are the best, and that's all you should be spending your time on. All right, quick recap. You want to make sure your camera's in burst mode because that's going to take a lot of pictures at once, and that's going to allow you to go back afterwards and pick out the shot where the ball is in just the right spot. Next is shutter speed. You want to make sure you shoot a fairly fast shutter speed. That's going to stop the motion of the player and the ball. For indoor volleyball here, I'm using about 1/500. For the aperture, you want to have the aperture kind of as wide as you can stand it while still getting in focus shots. So for volleyball, I'm using about f4.5, and that seems to be about right for this camera. If you go down to 2.8, you might find that you get a lot of blurry pictures. And if you close it down to, like f8, you might find that your pictures are too dark. And I'm using about 10,000 on the ISO. That's just what happens to be for today, but generally you want to bump the ISO up or down to make sure that you get a well exposed picture. Now I do like to shoot the ISO on manual, because if you're moving your camera around, if you have it on auto ISO, you might find that a light will get in the picture and then it'll darken it up because it thinks the light's brighter, or it doesn't see a light and then it overexposes. So I do like to shoot everything on full manual when I'm doing sports. All right, so I will say I'm not a big sports ball guy at all, but I do like watching my daughter play sports, and bringing my camera along to the tournaments gives me something to do while I'm here watching her play. And let me tell you, the parents absolutely love, and the players too, absolutely love getting the pictures. What I do is I put them on a Google Drive and I just share that link out with everybody. So I hope this helped you out, and put down in the comments if you thought it was helpful or if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.